happy to welcome you on this webinar organized by Africa Oil and Power and the Africa Energy Chamber. The session today is all about South Sudan. We are going to see how the country can preserve economic progress in the face of COVID-19. We have a very nice panel here with us today. Before I introduce my co-moderator, Elizabeth Rogo, I would like to go through a few housekeeping rules for you guys. We have a quite large audience today, so just a few rules so that we are nicely organized. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you have a toolbar. There are two items which you will use today. One of the items is the Q&A box on the right. So in the Q&A box, you're welcome to ask any question you'd like to the audience. This Q&A box will be moderated by Africa Oil and Power, by us. And I will jump in and ask a couple of questions to the audience. So obviously we might not be able to get to all your questions because there are a lot of you, but we'll try to accommodate as many as possible. The second item is the chat box, which you can see also in the toolbar on the bottom. This is here for you to chat amongst yourselves. So the audience, you can chat amongst yourself in this box about the topics at hand, about different things. I would please like to start using it right away. Could you state, members of the audience, where you are connecting from right away? That way we can see how far we are reaching you with this session today. So like I said, my moderator today, our moderator for this session is Elizabeth Rogo. She is president of the of East Africa for the African Energy Chamber and also CEO of Tsavo Oilfield Services. Liz, I'll leave it to you to introduce our panelists and to launch the discussion.
Thank you very much, Thomas, and welcome to everybody who's joined us on this very exciting topic, South Sudan, preserving economic progress in the face of COVID-19. We have a fantastic group of young gentlemen who are part of our panel, and I'm very excited to introduce them. We have a gentleman who's running a bit late, and he will be joining us, but we will start with this session. So, gentlemen, can I please ask you to give a couple of 30 seconds of who you are, your bio? And I'd like to start off with Felix, Mr. Felix Ataro. Mr. Felix Ataro is the corporate banking head at Stanbic South Sudan and a Kenyan by birth. Felix?
Thank you, Elizabeth. So I'm Felix Ataro, as mentioned by Elizabeth. By background, I'm an environmental scientist by training, but I've been a banker all my life ever since leaving school. Having been in banking for almost 12 years now, working in both personal banking all the way to corporate banking, and I've spent quite a bit of number of years in South Sudan managing different sectors, and most lately, actually, before taking the corporate banking head, I was the oil and gas banker for South Sudan. So I've worked very well with most of the oil and gas stakeholders, from the international companies to the local players, and I have a bit of a good understanding. I have a good understanding of what really goes on in financial sector in relation to oil and gas sector, particularly in South Sudan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Felix. Our next panelist is Michael Dott, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Nile Petroleum Services. Michael, could you please give us your bio? And thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. My name is Michael. I'm a mechanical engineer from Sudan University of Science and Technology. I've started my career in oil and gas since late 2003, where we developed Malub Oil Development Project, the current oil field producer right now, as a field engineer, and on until 2011, the year of independence. I decided to move to the private sector. I've co-founded Nile Petroleum Services. And we are 9 years right now on operation. We are a technical services provider in upstream facilities in South Sudan. We are 100% locally owned company. And currently we have expanded in our operation. We're running currently some projects in upstream facility. And we do have environmental solution projects as well. like oil recovery from bioremediation pond, and so on.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael. It's good to meet a fellow founder of an oil company. And our last panel is Mr. Robert Mdeza, who's the Chief Executive Officer for Trinity Energy. And Mr. Mdeza comes from Malawi. Mr. Mdeza, could you please give us your bio?
Thank you. As you have mentioned, Robert Mdeza is my name, from Malawi, but here in South Sudan. I'm the CEO of Trinity Energy Limited, an indigenous firm that I think has been accredited largely for eliminating the queues, the shortages of fuel since we came on board in May 2018. So we have supplied Juba and the rest of the country with the refined products, which has resolved that. But my background is I'm an accountant, a chartered accountant by profession, and I've been in the oil sector for the last 19 years. And I was given the task of forming our national oil company in Malawi from scratch up to the time when I was leaving 6 years later. It was a fully-fledged profitable entity. Then I went into consultancy. Before that, I came here. I've been a lecturer in a college, training chartered accountants, tax consultant in London. And I think that gives away my age. I've been around for quite a while.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining. And let's go straight to the question. As we said, our topic is looking at the economic progress in the face of COVID. And as of July 1st, South Sudan had recorded over 2,007 cases with 38 deaths. How is this COVID affecting the country's economic progress? Maybe I can start off with you, Michael. What is your opinion? Just a highlight.
Yeah, actually, it's quite obvious that COVID-19 has extremely affected the entire globe. And then South Sudan is a part of it, because we're not isolated from the whole world. Especially South Sudan is a landlocked country. We depend on our neighboring regional countries for our gateway into the global market for the logistic and delivery of different services. And despite of that, we're a young nation that have been have had independence on 2011. So we still in need of a lot of expertise to come from overseas, especially from Southeast Asia, where the COVID-19 started. So we're extremely affected in the sector of the oil, which is the main source of the country income. It's totally destabilized for the term of logistics, inflow of expat, movement of the material, and so forth. So that is so obvious that the economy is extremely affected by the COVID-19.
Thank you. Felix, South Sudan is East Africa's only oil producing nation. And I think sometimes when we talk about East Africa, we're all concentrating on the developmental projects of Lokicha and Tilenga. And we forget about South Sudan, and we shouldn't. And you know, we've featured South Sudan a lot under the AOP umbrella with very successful conferences. So again, with the impact of this COVID, what's being done to increase the interest and attract investments to current projects? Obviously, most of them are oil and gas.
Well, attracting investments into the countries is quite important. However, from a commercial banking point of view, I wouldn't say there's much that has gone on into that. I think probably a lot more into that. And that's just looking at the risk tolerance levels of these banks. Most of them are not quite geared yet to go into the huge project sort of lending that is usually required within the oil and gas sector. We do understand there's also a bit of working capital financing that's sometimes required to facilitate small businesses and corporates to be able to run on a day-to-day basis. And again, that would depend from one bank to another, because a number of them are running different models in South Sudan as we speak. We've seen, I mean, for big projects, for big capex spending probably and financing, that would, the kind of organizations that would have appetite for that probably would be the DFIs. the developmental financial institutions, because then they have mechanisms of being able to manage the sort of country risk elements that the commercial banks shy away from. The banks, I mean, not really the fault of anyone, but it's just what the market itself is. Banks have faced a number of challenges in country, but of course, which we are also working together with the regulator to be able to try to fix, you know, from liquidity challenges due to legacy issues, as well as lack of an active interbank market, interbank lending, you know, that would set a base that would make base for lending that would make sense. We've seen there's no T-bills as well as bonds, you know, that you can also use to benchmark interest rates, and even concerns around whether the legal system can actually support some of this deal financing in the country. So it's a combination of many things. There's a lot of work being done, of course, to improve that particular environment, and many stakeholders working together. But for now, being in the financial sector, I would say we are at a point where we are yet to have confidence to go for the big projects. And what we've seen, the kind of projects that have been sponsored for infrastructure in the country at the moment, they've actually come mainly from the DFI type of organizations. One of the things that as banks now we have to think beyond is just the commercial type of interest that, you know, we would earn some money from. Think more philanthropic and how to start contributing a lot more to CSI initiatives. Formed a foundation, you know, so that we can actually use the foundation to look at the other elements of being part of a community that are not commercially geared, but at the same time be able to contribute towards improving our participation in developing the economy of South Sudan. So I guess each bank is coming up with its own strategy around that. But for sure, we are working closely with the regulator and stakeholders to see how better to improve our participation in improving the local markets.
Thomas, did you have something to say?
No, not for now. I'll let you go on.
Okay, well, let me just stay on the bank, and I'd like to see how Robert and Michael in their businesses as CEOs of oil and gas companies. Robert, people like Stanbic, how are you interacting in terms of accessing funds in order to run your organization, especially in this period of COVID? Your mic is off.
Sorry. In our case, first and foremost, let me say we've taken a long-term view. COVID came and sort of shook us a bit. We are shaken. But we have taken a medium to long-term view about our projects in the country. And as I'm speaking, we work, of course, with Stanbic and the other banks locally for our local needs. But in the last 3 years, I think 2.5 years or so, we have tended to work, as Felix was saying, with the African Exim Bank. And so far, up to just about a week ago, we've been using a facility of about just quoting figures, about $30 million US. But we have just moved on to a new facility with the confidence that we have built up with them, where we are now accessing $50 million. Basically, this is to support financing of refined products. So we have set up facilities for that. We have also accessed facilities for our refinery project, which is coming out on board. Again, taking a long-term commitment to the country. And we are at the moment looking at, we are already at an advanced stage where the refinery project is going ahead. So locally, we worked with Stanbic when we started in 2018. But things changed as the transaction was growing and maturing, to the extent that we work with them for inflows. In terms of the local currency, we're working with another bank to mobilize the local currency.
Are you seeing a lot of interest from Kenyan banks? Because we know Kenya has quite a large number of banks within South Sudan. Besides Stanbic, what is the reception from the other banks?
So we don't carry our eggs in one basket. Actually, as I said, when we started the African Bank facility for $30 million, we worked with Stanbic. They were the local collecting agents for our main bank there. But locally here, we work with the Kenyan banks, we're with KCB, we're with Equity, and locally with Ivory, Freeland, I think which is from West Africa. We basically work with everybody because of the nature of our transactions. They're huge, and I think the local currency denomination, the highest is only 500. So for us to handle the flows that come with our hands because of dealing in fuel, we have to have so many collecting places. So we work very well with KCB, Equity, with our friends who are now coming into the mobile money. We have also linked up with the mobile money and Gurush so that we reduce handling cash, especially with the COVID-19. Yeah.
Well,
so to answer your question, yes, we work with everybody.
Okay, no, that's exciting to hear. Michael, what's your take with regards to Nile Petroleum Services?
Liz, if I'd just like to interrupt you for two things. The first item is that we launched a poll on the conversation. The question is there adequate access to funding for African companies to make it through COVID-19? 88% of our audience believes there is not. So definitely a topic in hand we have been talking about. And the second item I wanted to introduce, Jacob Deng has joined us. Welcome, Jacob. Thanks for being with us, and welcome to the webinar. Liz, I'll leave it back to you.
Thank you very much. Michael, if you could just hold your response. Let me just introduce Mr. Jacob Deng, who's the Director General for Planning and Projects at the South Sudan Electricity Corporation. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Deng. Would you like to just give just 30 seconds about who you are to the participants?
Thank you so much. First of all, I must apologize because I have taken very long to join you people. Internet here is a bit problematic. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we do.
Yes, thank you. I am Jacob Manyuan Deng. I am sitting in the office of the Director General of Planning and Projects for South Sudan Electricity Corporation. I am a fan of your programs, and every year I participate in these programs of oil and power. I've done some of the presentations on our sector for the power development in South Sudan. And yesterday I got disoriented a bit, and so I couldn't go through the programs, but today I try to catch up with you people. So having come late, I would want to listen first, and then I can come in. I appreciate the fact that you managed to connect all of us and be able to hear from all the professionals and the experts across the world on oil and power. So thank you so much for welcoming me to the program.
Thank you, Mr. Deng. We'll give you a few minutes to settle in, so do not worry. So I'll continue with my question to Michael, who's the CEO for Nile Petroleum Services, and what is his experience with the financial institutions in South Sudan in order to continue a business, especially in this period of COVID?
Okay, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for the question. In fact, it's so obvious, and my brother Felix is much more aware than everybody of us here, that the banking in South Sudan is more likely into transactions and facilitating business. It's so premature to talk of having financial institution in South Sudan, because we can't throw a blame to the banking system which is running here. We can share it with the current situation of the country, political unrest, unstable economy, all these things. So the risk is so high in a way that the banking sector, which is operating in South Sudan, to enter into the real financial institution, like fund the projects and do all these things. Because it's very easy for us, the business men, to create projects and successful businesses. And it is a role of financial institution to fund the business so that the thing will run and the economy move that way. So we do really appreciate the small services that we do have from the banking, because it's so difficult actually to move on with the business without the proper banking system. So we started earlier with Equity Bank. They've been with us in a good time, even in a bad time during the first oil prices slump 2015. And again now during COVID-19, they're helping. Recently, Stanbic has came in also, playing a very strong role to keep the wheel turning. And we're still hoping that if things improve, obviously there's another banking, competition will be there, things will improve. But really, what we're really doing here in South Sudan is so difficult. Without real, proper financial institution to fund the projects is so difficult. But the little we're getting from the banking is just more likely transaction, opening the letter of credit, which is the safe way of running the business with overseas companies, and the rest of transactions, because you can't run business without a banking system. So we do really appreciate it, despite of the difficulties they're facing, like chipping in the currency and blah, 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 and all these things.
Mm-hmm. So Felix, basically you as the representative of the banks have a big task ahead of you to ensure that people like Robert and Michael are able to continue with their business and grow their business successfully as we continue. So, I mean, I want to pull Mr. Jacob in, but I promised to give him a few minutes to kind of settle in. You did make a comment that the risk tolerance is much, much higher in oil and gas, even though we're in a developmental stage, as opposed to maybe places like power, where I'm seeing more of the larger banks like AFDB, coming in, and I think you kind of alluded to that, to finance these big projects, power plants and renewable projects. So what do you think you can do? What do you think you can do differently going forward?
Thank you so much. The energy sector, as we all know, is a capital-intensive sector, and with the situation we are in now, we had a lot of plans to develop most of the hydro potential sites for South Sudan. As we are all aware that in South Sudan, people are in dire need of power. We using the diesel-fired generation, which is very expensive to operate. It's also very dirty to the environment, and it has a lot of hiccups here and there. So Africa Development Bank, it's important to appreciate on this forum, they've intervened into the sector. Previously, from 2013 up to now, Africa Development Bank had pulled together some finances, and they work hard to finance the Juba Power Distribution Project. Now, we also had Ezra that came in the middle to actually use the distribution system that was financed by Africa Development Bank so that they can inject the power. So there is 31 megawatts that was installed, and it was a plan that it would be up to 100 megawatts, but it's being installed in phases. Right now, we have been having issues in terms of the diesel-fired, the diesel, the fuel, the provision of fuel. It's normally imported, not really from within. Although we are producing the oil, but we have not yet developed our refineries. So most of it comes from Kenya, and there are still on and off operations that we are facing right now. With the COVID-19, we see there's an impact, a negative impact on the operation of the power plant. The diesel-fired generation is affected simply because of the closure of the borders and all this. So my perspective about the COVID-19 on the economy, especially on the energy sector, what is required as of now is to continue developing the plans as we prepare to get off the period. When we get off the period, it will be an opportunity for every investor to continue plan and maybe come to South Sudan. For us, in terms of the oil produce in the country, some of the people who are in the oil field, they know there is an impact, but this impact can also impact on the economy in general. So this pandemic, it's a responsibility of the government to make sure that even if there is an impact, people must also work very hard and move around it to see that the economy is surviving. Because if you do not have an alternative, it can be an entire collapse. For us in the energy sector, the investors are still with us. We are still doing the paperwork. We are still communicating. We are still planning on how to roll out most of the other projects that were planned before. Where I got difficulties right now is maybe if you want to recruit a consultant or an expatriate, it's difficult for them to fly in. But then work is going on with the previous planned projects that are actually in the pipeline. So we felt that COVID-19 has an impact, and it's a responsibility of all of us in our industry to make sure that things move on. That's what I can say, and that is my opinion. I feel we should not stop. We must plan and work hard so that when we get over the period, we will be into it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Jacob. I think just for our participants to really get an idea, I'm just going to stick on this on power for a few seconds before we delve back into oil and gas. So we only have 1% of South Sudanese, and that's 12.5 million that you have in Sudan. Only 1% have access to the grid, and South Sudanese pay some of the highest electricity rates in the world. So you mentioned this 100 megawatts project, which has, as you rightfully said, is being phased. The first phase being 33 megawatts diesel fired. Are you looking at any other forms of energy, any generation like renewable? How much hydro are you pulling into this proposed 100 megawatt project?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You know, for us, from 2005, when we signed the CPA, we inherited a lot of the drawbacks from the National Electricity Corporation of the Sudan, especially the tariff. And the tariff they were using by that time, it was meant for the poor of the poorest, because it was actually used to maintain security in the south. It's important for me to mention that. So from the not cause reflecting in and started the rehabilitation of the power plants across the country. Now, what has been the issue is the spare part and the fuel. Because as I mentioned before, the Electricity Corporation has not been self-sustaining, simply because it is not independent. It was a semi-autonomous organization for the government, which was depositing the revenue into the block account. And so the operations has not been very efficient as such, because when you deposit the revenue into the block accounts, you cannot buy the fuses, you cannot buy the transformers, you cannot buy anything that is getting spoiled on daily basis. So what we have been trying to do is to make the utility to be self-sustaining, so that the capacity is increased. Of course, it has been 1%, simply because we are not developed the renewable sources of energy. And the only source we had one line from Sudan, which is terminated at Reng, the border town of South Sudan. And that capacity is not being actually injected into the interior part of the southern part of South Sudan. So it has remained there. But we only have the isolated grids, and that is why it has been rotating as 1%. It has never increased. It is actually centered in Juba, in Wau and Malakal. This is an isolated grid, which is on and off because of the problem of the fuel and the spare parts. And therefore, the main objective in our organization now is to develop one hydro potential sites of South Sudan. You might be well aware that South Sudan is very rich in terms of hydros. We have over 2,000 megawatts, which if it is, we can actually take we can even sell it to the region. And so we have decided to develop one hydropower plant that is called Biden in our plan now. Initially, we had actually started an hydropower plant called Fuller Rapids, and it was financed by the Norwegian government. But when the war broke out in 2013, they had to shift their funding into the humanitarian wing. And so it was stopped there. Therefore, for us now as a government, it is the only plan we have, because hydro is the one that will cover the base load. You cannot cover the base load with even solar. You cannot cover it with the wind. You cannot cover it with other renewable energy sources, including the thermal itself. And so the main target we have now, our whole eyes are on hydro. And because we have the potential, this is where we are going to increase from 1% to maybe even 50% coverage of South Sudanese. It has not increased from 2005 up to now, simply because thermal or diesel fire is on and off. It doesn't really move up because of the spare part and the fuel. As of now, it is only Juba that is having power in the whole country, if you can imagine, and the little power that is in rank, which is not able to cover the whole country.
Okay, Mr. Jacob, I don't know if you can hear me. Jacob, I don't know if you can hear me. Sorry, we've got so many questions coming in, and I've got to get our other panelists to say something. But just one quick question, one quick answer. I'm being asked, does the Ministry of Electricity have power transmission projects in their pipeline? And then we'll go to some polls.
Thank you. We have power transmission project, especially the 400 kV line that is going up to Karuma, a line that is already in the pipeline. We are looking for the funding for that line, so that we can use the same line to transmit to the region the potential of the hydro we have in case we develop one. We also have another one between South Sudan and Ethiopia. We also have a plan with the one that is in Reng to be actually extended to the interior part of South Sudan. So we are actually all around in that area. But all are in the plans. We need funding.
Okay. All right. So that's good. So the participants know there's a lot of opportunities in South Sudan. You're looking for funding. You're looking for expertise. And we will get back to you later on how we can get more information from you. So if I can go back to the rest of the panel, and this is more on the oil and gas side. Can somebody answer this? What timeline are we looking for the resumption of production on blocks 1A, 1B, and 5A? And what strategy has been put in place by the government, supported by partners, to cope with the effects of reduced revenue from oil exports? Mr. Robert, would you like to answer that?
Okay. I know that there's work going on in the background, and that Block 5A, there's advanced work that is going on. But to give you timelines, I don't have visibility of the actual work schedule from the Ministry of Petroleum.
Yes.
But definitely there is work going on in the background to resume. And as you know, you rightly pointed out earlier on that South Sudan has been when we say East Africa, actually South Sudan that is producing oil. So there's expertise on the ground. Yes, COVID has blocked some people from coming in, But I'm aware that there's progress, and the Block 5A anytime should start coming back on stream.
Well, thank you. Michael, do you want to add in your comments on that? Your mic is off. I need your audio.
Okay, thank you. It's so clear that there was a very good and strong move from the government to resume the oil production from 2 blocks which were not producing, 5A, and the block which is being operated by the GPOP. Because the constraint which led these 2 blocks to not to operate was the conflict which was started in early 2013, at the end of 2013, and again on 2016. So when the visualized peace agreement was signed and being implemented, there's no any threat to throw back the operation. But cause the recent situation also, it made with another constraint which will delay the startup of the two blocks. Because of COVID-19, it has blocked the logistics, as I said before, and again also the slump of the prices of the oil, because the oil companies are investors. So the lower the prices of the oil, the security measures they put, and they cut the expenses so that they can thrive and move on. So as soon as the price will pick up gradually, as you can see now, lockdown is being lifted partially from country to country, depending on the politics being made. Flight is resuming. Consumption of the fuel is starting up a little by little. So demand of the oil will come. So as the price will rise up a little bit, then things will gear up again, and the startup will come on. But there are activities which are right now going on, but they are not that efficient or into its schedule which was planned, so that to boost up the production, to increase the income for the government, because the peace need a lot of money. Now COVID-19 is the main constraint and the oil prices. So now gradually, I think we can anticipate that as soon as the thing went back to normal, the resumption will be normally moving on.
And what is your view on the recent pushback on the licensing round that was supposed to be launched this year? Can you give us an update, if you know, on the bid licensing round, Michael? Hello, Michael. Oh, I think we kind of lost him. Robert, do you have any views on the bid licensing round?
No, I don't have.
Okay. You don't. Felix, can you answer that question?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
I will
just jump in with a question on exploration and production. We have KB Trivedi from the Strategic Fuel Fund in South Africa, who's asking what initiatives are to be taken to attract exploration and production service companies in South Sudan, including, he mentions, seismic data acquisition. What actions can be taken from the government to attract exploration production service companies? I think, Robert, maybe could you share your views on this particular question?
This is an area where I think our colleagues like Jacob have visibility on. And probably I would take on board this. But I think generally the landscape is open because I'm aware of some Canadian firms that came and were offering services. I think they approached us to see if we could work together to gather this data and then later on commercialize it for the sake of opening up the country. But we didn't go far because, as I said earlier on, we're engaged in a refinery project at the moment, which is taking off most of our focus and effort to ensure that we succeed in that front. So I would have loved this question to be answered by the guys from the policy and the government sort of representatives that might be on this panel today.
Thank you, Robert. I'll leave it back to you, Liz, because this question was specifically about oil and gas. So I'll leave it back to you, Liz.
All right. Michael may have been a good person to answer, but it looks like he's dropped off the call. So I wanted to pick up on something that Robert mentioned, was South Sudan being a developing or producing country for oil and gas, I beg your pardon. So with the upcoming development projects in Kenya and Uganda, how do you see the transfer of skill sets from South Sudan, since you're the only producing nation in East Africa? Robert, can I put that?
Yes. Okay, so South Sudan is endowed with a lot of expertise. South Sudanese that most of them had gone out, I think, during the liberation struggle. And I think in most cases, we were involved somehow in the oil and gas sector, wherever they were. Canada, mostly Canada and Europe, Norway, and so on and so forth. So we have a critical mass of expertise within South Sudan, and also outside there amongst the South Sudanese expatriates that can be tapped in. So today, it's not a question of whether South Sudan is what the sector in East Africa is able to attract in terms of remuneration, the environment, and so on and so forth. So that pool of resource is there. Even here in South Sudan, you've got a lot of geoscientists, you've got a lot of engineers that are there, women, men and women actually. I was surprised the other day I met a lady engineer where we were discussing some opportunities. So it's a matter of I think maybe from the chamber, you can create a portal where this expertise can be connected to the rest of the region so that they benefit from local expertise. The beauty with using local expertise is that we have got our feet in it. So we're not going to sink a hole in the ground and then pollute where our cows and goats go and graze, because we are part and parcel of the environment. So I think I would encourage that we put a scheme in place where we can attract these people into a resource pool where those that are investing will easily go and look. So yes, we have expertise here.
Yes, I'll be very happy to inform you the African Energy Chamber as a chamber is very much into promoting this sort of expertise. So we'll make sure as we continue to really look at South Sudan in particular, and ensure that we see more South Sudanese come into the new projects in Kenya and Tanzania in particular. And I totally agree. I've been to South Sudan and I'm amazed with the level of expertise that you have in that part of the country. Michael, the question, because I'm sorry you kind of fell off, but the question was with the upcoming developments in terms of the transfer of skill sets from South Sudan to the rest of East Africa. What's your view?
Okay, my apology. I just lost the power. I have to reconnect again. So the perspective of transfer of knowledge at this stage now is not that that huge, because calibration is not yet on the ground. Because as I can see right now, those of Uganda, they are yet to start producing. It's still in development stage. And Kenya, they are still starting, and as well as Tanzania. But we are far ahead of them. So the only way that the knowledge can be transferred is when there is actually a local companies from South Sudan here who are cooperating in regional companies, like in Tanzania, like in Kenya. They can collaborate together, they can team up, like in joint venture or consortium or any kind of that. Then through the joint team working, then the knowledge can be transferred during the on-job training and different way of moving it. But I can't see that on the ground on this time. But in the nearest future, of course, people can collaborate, people can work together, because it's much more easier to acquire knowledge from the neighboring regional countries rather than going so far to acquire knowledge. It can be so somehow a bit expensive, and we are sharing the same borders, the same infrastructure, So it's much easier to share the knowledge which each and every country have. And South Sudan, of course, is the only producing country in the region of East Africa. And the rest of countries, of course, they will come as soon as they develop and reach the stage of production.
So the local content procedures and policies in South Sudan, how are they compared to what we're seeing in the rest of East Africa and maybe even West Africa like Ghana? Do you have a very strong policy? Michael,
okay, thank you for the question. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for the question. I myself, I preach strongly in local content because as we can see, all of the countries here in Africa, for example, those who have started producing oil ahead of us, they have a very well organized local content like those of Ghana, they have a very good example, and those of Equatorial Guinea, they have a very good example. Also, as here in South Sudan, there is a local content law which is underway now to be brought. But we do believe to make this local content work properly, it needs to be policed. It needs to be enforced so as to work properly and to make sure it's well implemented, to give a way for the local companies to thrive and grow, and to give a way also for the local personnel to be engaged in different level of management, in different level of acquiring useful knowledge for them to be competitive in regional market and international. So we do have it actually, and government is working hard right now to look into this law. Is being implemented and is working on the ground. And of course, it's not government also alone who can work it hard and to put it on the ground. Also, the companies which are operating like private sector also need to be involved, like the investors also need to be involved, and to be preached and to be taught that this local content is very crucial for the country to grow. Mm-hmm. So if we compare it right now, South Sudan is ahead of the rest of countries in the region in terms of producing oil, in terms of laws and regulations. But if we look into like Tanzania, they just went in very smart way. They took a model of Ghana and they adapted for themselves, which is quite easy from you to come and try to extract your own law and put it on the ground. So we cannot say we're behind in terms of local content, but we are there. But we need to work hard and to put more effort on the local content perspective, to put it on the ground, so as after that we can start gaining the fruit of the local content.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Felix, I have a question with regards to the issue of sanctions. And you know, it comes in different ways, and how it may disrupt you know, doing business in South Sudan. And I will just say personally for myself, you know, I've had a few local companies approach me, and you know, we're trying to figure out how you know, best, how do we work together? You know, so there are these issues that are, you know, the sanction issue is an issue. We don't know whether it's on or off or who it affects. Are you able to assist us on that?
Sure.
Yeah, actually, the sanctions.
Let me just ask Felix first, Michael, and I'll get back to you. Yes.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. That's definitely one of the topics that we have been dealing with for quite some time, I think since 2016. But before I go into that, I also wanted to contribute to the skills transfer discussion a bit, if you may allow.
Yes.
So there's things we may not be doing in South Sudan as financial institutions. And it is because of various reasons and also limitations that we do face from, of course, a country risk and risk appetite position. But however, I did mention earlier on that we have to think of other smarter ways of which to contribute to South Sudan's development in other ways that are not non-commercially oriented. And this is one of the areas that we also keenly thinking of how best to help South Sudan market some of its potential outside of South Sudan. we did organize a session about some time early, actually it was early last year, no, late last year, I guess, on Mozambique opportunity. And we did hold a session in Nairobi. It was interesting to actually find South Sudanese companies, South Sudan companies participating in that session here in Nairobi. People came all the way from Juba. And they were very much interested in finding out what's really going on in Mozambique. We are interested in going in there. How can you guys help us to get to the ground and understand what opportunities we could explore? I think those are things we can do a lot more proactively, given that we do have a footprint, quite a big footprint in Africa, considering the number of countries that we operate in. And there's definitely countries that are at different stages of development of the oil and gas sector, and the skills transfer, of course, will vary depending on the stages. But South Sudan has one advantage. We are seeing a lot of rather Asian country oil and gas companies participation in most of these sectors. Already South Sudan has experience working in the sector as well as working with this kind of partners. So there is a lot of value they could bring in case they can get opportunities to participate outside of South Sudan. And so there's a lot of marketing that organizations like the Africa Energy Chambers as well as Stanbic Bank, we could work together to help South Sudan showcase its expertise out there and also help them get some opportunities beyond South Sudan borders. Now, coming back to the issue of sanctions. This and a number of guys in this session, I think we've discussed this for quite many years. The fact that there were some companies, oil and gas companies particularly, that were placed under trade restrictions, by the United States Chamber of Commerce. That also led to some psychological impacts within the financial sectors, whereby some were shying away from wanting to deal with those organizations. Practically speaking, we did see, we did face challenges in terms of how to continue ensuring our clients that they will continue getting funds coming into South Sudan seamlessly, as well as have capability to make offshore payments, because that's where mostly the correspondent banks were coming in. For local payments, it wasn't such a big challenge. And we've seen that it's not quite an easy, it's a bit of a complex matter and requires deliberate efforts from whether it is Ministry of Petroleum, the government itself, from a policy point, and also the stakeholders to kind of try address some of these concerns that are being raised in relation to the sector, so that it also makes it easier for the commercial banking sector to enable ease of flow funds in and out of the country. Right now, as we speak, since 2016, I can tell you we've seen about 4 banks, international correspondent banks, pull out of South Sudan market in terms of supporting it. And right now, I only know of primarily two international banks that are still supporting these clearing services of funds from South Sudan. So there is very finite organizations that are willing to continue supporting the correspondent banking element, which is the main impact that the sanctions as well as trade restrictions have had on South Sudan as a country and the sector. And banks as us, we're increasingly facing very difficult conversations with our partners for correspondent banking, because they need assurance that whatever concerns they have, they are being dealt with from a national level. In South Sudan, we're also lacking a national payments platform at the moment. And as such, you find that to make simple transactions, we have to rely on a very long route outside of South Sudan back into South Sudan for you to be able to make very simple transactions on banks that could be even 10 meters away from each other. But then that's our reality at the moment. But I think what we can do about it is we have to keep working on the image that the global players see South Sudan as a country. We have to be deliberate on approaching the bodies that might have issued sanctions or restrictions, some form of restrictions on South Sudan, and have very candid engagements with them on, and if there's indeed some real concerns from the global players, maybe South Sudan has to deliberately be able to show them also what they've done about it, because there is work that has been done. Now, whether that work that has been done has gotten to the relevant parties to understand and probably change their position on South Sudan, we cannot tell. But for sure, as commercial banks, and in fact, this is why lately we are asking ourselves, is credit really the biggest issue we are facing? The biggest threat we are facing is the fact that we might run out of correspondent banking services in South Sudan soon. and we don't know what that might mean to the country. But we are doing our best from a commercial banking point to just ensure that the corresponding bank understand the businesses that we are doing, the fact that we understand our clients, KYC, the usual stuff, and that our clients actually are doing proper businesses and not really engaged in anything that would give them concerns. But we definitely all have to work together with both the government, the Central Bank of South Sudan, and even the Bank of South Sudan Association, in order to be able to change this particular image, because it is quite straining relationships between correspondent banks and local commercial banks.
I want to ask Robert, if I may, as a business entrepreneur, how does this affect you in your business? I know you're more on the refinery side, but is this impacting your business?
Yeah, well, in a sense that some small transactions obviously have to be created. But as a company, we have not had that impact. I mean, the UN comes around, asks questions, how have you transacted? We have put all our transactions in the open, and they are traceable. They can see where we are taking we are involved in the crude oil side. They see exactly what we are doing. And so for them, they have comfort that this is the transparent process that is going on. And to the extent that I mentioned earlier on that we had in 2018 secured a line of 30 million US dollars from African Bank. That has just been increased almost twice to 50 million, which shows to you that yes, sanctions might apply to countries or sectors within the country, but specific companies, if they are able to follow the transparent processes and stick to it, they should be able to navigate through this maze of sanctions, which is what we have been able to do. And we have attracted investment in, as I said, in the refinery that we're working on. We are also working with the government. Actually, I was surprised that Michael didn't mention that there's a 20 megawatt power, solar power, hybrid power, which is a generation as well as storage of the power that is generated, funded by government, I think through a Flexing Bank, which we are involved in, I think, on the construction side, because we want to lay in the ropes, because we want to replicate that in the other towns. So it's also at a micro level, each company must be able to adhere to the rules of the game, transparency, good governance, and so on and so forth. We are shortly joining the UN Global Compact and all the initiatives that go with it, so that people have confidence. When we walk on the stage, they know that whatever they are doing is for the good of everybody. So yes, at a micro level, we really need, as companies, to walk the talk and not just try under an umbrella that we are sanctioned based. The sanctions are specific and they are targeted.
Yes, yes. Mr. Jacob, in the power sector, are you finding sanctions affecting your business, or are you in the same realm as Robert, where Trinity Energy is concerned?
Yes, thank you. This sanction has an impact in a way, because most of the financiers that are actually funding my projects in South Sudan, I feel there is a motivation and control. We experienced this in 2016 when we actually contracted a Chinese company that had an issue of debarment, which was connected to the issues of the sanction, which I cannot detail very much. So when we were supposed to start a section or a component of the project, it was difficult for us to move ahead. And then we were shown red on the line. Then the communication later on was revealed that there was a sanction on that section. So sanction is affecting the operations of the projects and even the implementation in terms of the disbursement and most of the other operations. So sanction is being felt. However, we have been told and we've read and we've heard that it is targeted. But then that thing could be on a paper. But in the financial sector, those who are actually in the financial sector can really tell us that this sanction is affecting at all the spectrum. For us, our disbursement, when it comes, it was supposed to be actually taking maybe 14 days or 21. But it can even go for more days for it to be realized on our side, simply because the money is green and all this. So when it goes to the source, it takes a while. And this affects the components and the implementation of the activities in the projects. We are feeling sanctioned on our side.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, we're almost coming to the end of our webinar, and I'd like to just ask one more question and then wrap up. If Thomas doesn't have anything to add.
Do.
Oh, do you have? Hi, Thomas. Okay.
Thanks. You're reading my mind. Yeah, just before you wrap up and you can ask the last question, we actually have an announcement to make. We have a special report which about South Sudan, which will be released today. As a special treat to the attendees of this webinar, you will receive for free the special report in your email box just after the webinar. This report is South Sudan oil and power, so it touches on the oil and gas sector, the power sector, and generally the economic opportunities in South Sudan, given, of course, the very specific time we are currently going through. So yeah, so look forward in your email box to receive the report, and Liz, I'll give it back to you for last question.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. My last question is, what steps must be taken, and you as a business owner, to ensure protecting the environment and reducing carbon emissions? We've been hearing quite a number of stories coming out of South Sudan of some dire environmental issues. What is Nile Petroleum Services doing to be part of the solution? Your mic is off, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth, for the question. We in Nile Petroleum Services, our motto is friendly to environment. Actually, if we come to the environmental pollution in regard to the oil producing, it's more likely connected with the produced water, which is the geo-aqua, the water which are produced along with the oil. So as we know that our field are aging and reservoir is getting changed, and as far as we're looking to pump more oil, so we have to pump more fluid with a lot of water. When this water came to the surface, it created a lot of problems because they are very, very high toxic. They have a lot of chemicals. There are a lot of heavy metals also can be found in it. So managing this water above ground is quite tricky. So there is some methodologies that they use, like a water injection, to re-inject this water back to the reservoir, which is not practical. So recently there's technologies which are available right now, which is enhanced oil recovery, EOR. It's basically the concept of the EOR is like, why should we pump the water out from the ground first and come to manage it on the surface? We have to manage it from the ground to look into the pay zone where we can produce more oil with less water and keep that water on the ground there without bringing them to the surface. That will reduce a lot of pollution that happen. And again, we need to conduct continuous maintenance for the field surface facilities and trunk lines and pipelines to prevent any leakage, because the pipeline is corroded when the time came, and then we have to put contingency measures should anything went wrong with the facility to prevent the spillage of the oil. Also, these are the main pollution that are created by the production of the oil. But if we come to carbon emission, I think it's generally by the cars, by the fuel stations. As we are producing now the power, I think Jacob can answer that part, which is connected to carbon emission. But for the oil sector, should we implement proper enhanced oil recovery, we will increase production without increasing a lot of produced water to the surface. And then we will reduce a big amount and protect the environment.
I think, Michael, you've touched on a very important point, and I'm hoping that the participants that are here, especially those who are going to be involved in the developmental work in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, this environmental issue is very, very important. It is something that we can definitely learn from South Sudan, and it's something that I think you really need to push to show the rest of us not to make the same mistakes that we're seeing in South Sudan. And I also agree with you, technology, the best technology, we should bring the best technology to this part of the world in order to develop our fields in a much more sustainable way. So just quickly to Jacob, and then I'll give each of you 30 minutes to sign off. Jacob, the environmental, more or less the carbon emission, how are you mitigating that in your projects?
Thank you, Elizabeth. The main issue here for us, I think we are one of the major contributors to the environmental impact in terms of the carbon emission, simply because we are operating across the country, the diesel-fired generation all over the country, and there is no mechanism to control that. So the main issue here is to invest in renewable energy sources that are very clean and more friendly to the environment. For us, there are a lot of technologies that are being introduced, like in Ezra Power Plant, we are having the machines that is introduced to clean the environment, but it is not effective. Therefore, because it is short-lived, we are planning to entirely embark on the renewable energy sources that can be able to cover the base load and make the environment clean around us and even all over the country. So this is the only target we are trying to think about. Right now we have a thermal, a solar power plant that is being constructed around Juba here, so that we can boost the capacity we have. These solar sources, always in most cases, are actually used for the off-grid. And for us here, we want to boost the power we have in Juba as we phase out the diesel generation that we have been operating. So this is the main thing we are trying to introduce into the system.
Thank you, Jacob. Robert, would you like to give your closing remarks? We need to be very fast, gentlemen.
Okay, I think just to say that while government legislation and enforcement is very key, we as a company, we say that we should do self-regulation. And also as an industry, we must go into self-regulation. We must embrace sustainable business practices, not only as a good to have, but also as a measure of our own competitive advantage as a company. And that is why Trinity Energy, as I'm speaking to you now, is embracing the principles of the United Nations Global Compact. So that going forward, and we'll be a signatory to the Global Reporting Initiative, as probably, hopefully, will be the first in South Sudan. So that, because we know we are an indigenous company, we swim in the rivers, we fish in the rivers, we eat meat from the cows that are grazing. We cannot have an attitude where we are just like visitors. We belong, and we need to grow together, and we need to guide our brothers and sisters into a sustainable future. So that's what Trinity Energy is all about.
Thank you very much, Robert. Thank you, Felix.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, and the organizers of this session. I think it's been quite engaging and very useful in terms of getting various stakeholders to discuss the current issues around oil and gas and even power and energy. I think for us, from a financial institutions perspective and even Stanbic Bank, there is a new normal now. COVID-19 is here. It's no longer a pandemic. We now see, we now see it as an endemic, and as such, then we all have to kind of adjust to this new way of doing business and operating. We've gotten a very unique opportunity actually to push digitization, which before was a bit of a challenge for us in South Sudan. And even what you're doing now is a testimony that it's possible to actually hold these kind of sessions together virtually, whereas before you'd have to wait for Africa Oil and Power Conference in Juba. But also, having said that, for me, again, I like the question on sanctions, because that's increasingly becoming a very big headache for us as financial institutions, for us to be able to guarantee, safe transfer of funds for our clients in and out of the country, in order to enable them to continue doing business or trade with each other. And as such, it is something that, I would urge all the stakeholders involved to pay more attention to this, because it is increasingly becoming quite a bit of a pain on a daily basis with the international correspondent banking partners. As such, also as financial institutions, again, we should not just be commercially oriented. We should also look at how do we contribute to development of the society, because that's our community. We live there. South Sudan is our home. We drive our growth. We are there to stay. We are not going anywhere. And as such, for us, seeing South Sudan develop in all ways possible is something we are interested in. And definitely, you'll be feeling us a lot more in terms of the other partnerships that you would bring in that are different from your usual banking partnership. Thank you.
So Michael, thank you. Michael, you want to close out the session for us?
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Actually, as a conclusion, I would like to highlight strongly in terms of local content, because we want to urge the government not only to put the legislature and to put the local content law in place, but also we like government also to work hard to guard and to enforce the local content. So that is the only way that the local companies can grow, can thrive, can be strong enough to compete with international companies, and they will achieve a good development in the country. Secondly, we would like to talk also of the sanction. The sanction actually is far beyond our reach, because they are made for the reason, and as it was said, they are made in the way that it's segregated, it's not general, but it affects us in a way or another, as it's been mentioned. It pulled back the business. Things cannot move smoothly. As far as now, we are in era of the peace here in South Sudan. When the peace is in, I would like also to urge our government to put a good legislator to encourage the financial institution to operate freely, to give us a very strong platform for us to run the business, more likely like our competitors from the region and from the whole world, who came with a strong, well, financial institutions which are supporting them, which we don't have it here in South Sudan. And it is very expensive actually to do transaction and to do financial processes here in South Sudan. So we're looking for the better move on, all the government, the private sector, the companies, and the financial institution also, as the things are getting to improve. Finally, for the environment also, we would like to encourage all technologies to be implemented in order to produce oil in very safe way, in very good way, in sustainable way, that it will not affect the environment and the stakeholders. Like practices which have been used here in South Sudan previously actually have been affecting the environment in a very large way, because they're using a rapid pumping system, which is submersible pumps. And there is another technology which is good, reciprocating pumps. They produce less oil, but there is no any pollution. They are cheap in operation and they are durable. So we would like South Sudanese Ministry of Petroleum to adopt the good practices for those blocks which are going to explore to do the sustainable environmental protection perspective. That is the last important point I would like to add. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Felix, Jacob, Robert, and Michael. It's been a very interesting forum. I wish we could have gone on much longer, but we've got to be cognizant other people have things to do. And thank you again for the participants who have stayed on. As we've indicated, the recording will be on the web for you to review. If you have any questions, you can reach out to myself, Elizabeth, at energychamber.org. The Africa Energy Chamber as a whole, please, I urge all of you to become members. This is one chamber that you cannot miss. We also have the regional East Africa, which is what I head. And I'm very, very excited to really start working strongly with our brothers. I don't see sisters, but our brothers and sisters in South Sudan. And I see a lot of opportunities that we can do on a regional basis. Thank you again, everybody. And thank you to my co-host, Thomas. Thomas, where are you? If you have any last parting thoughts, and obviously, and also to Katie, who's hiding in Waco, in Dallas, DFW, in Texas, and she's in the background. But Thomas?
No, thank you so much, Liz. I don't have anything to add. Like you said, this session was recorded and will be available on YouTube on the Africa Oil and Power channel. But yes, thanks again to our audience, thanks to our panelists, and thank you so much, Liz, for having us today, and looking forward to the next session with us and with you. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Good night.